My wife cheated on me with her boss, then hijacked our $500, $0 inheritance and a shady marriage settlement to buy a house she never intended to live in. Now she's filing for divorce and claiming I'm crazy. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my marriage fell apart over a lying, cheating wife. Honestly, if you told me a year ago that I'd catch my wife, Lisa, screwing her boss, Mark, I'd have laughed in your face. But life has a way of throwing punches when you're least expecting them. The weird part is, it all started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Little things that I brushed off as stress or work-related nonsense. I mean, Lisa was always a bit bitchy when she was busy, snapping at me over small stuff, but I thought she was just overwhelmed. She was a high-powered executive, always busy, always on her phone, and I figured that was just personality, kind of sharp, a little bitchy, but I loved her. But then the signs started piling up. She'd come home later than usual, claiming she was working late, but I'd notice her phone buzzing constantly when she thought I wasn't looking. She'd quickly silence it or hide it in her purse. I caught her deleting messages once, and I remember feeling a weird coldness creeping into my chest. I didn't want to believe it, but I also couldn't ignore that little voice telling me something was off. One night I decided to check her phone. I know trust is supposed to be there, but after months of her secretive behavior, I couldn't help myself. I found texts between her and Mark, flirty, suggestive, outright inappropriate. They were talking about meeting up outside of work, about sneaking away for private time, and even discussing plans that sounded more like a secret affair than a professional relationship. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I spent a few days gathering my thoughts, trying to process what I'd found. I couldn't believe my wife, the woman I'd married and trusted, was cheating on me with her boss, the guy she used to pretend was just a friend at the office. The betrayal cut deep. It wasn't just about the sex. It was about the lies, the deception, the fact that she'd been lying to my face for months. Then came the night I decided enough was enough. I waited until she came home late again, and I sat her down in the living room. Her eyes flashed with annoyance when she saw me, like I was bothering her. I didn't hold back. I told her I knew everything, that I'd seen the messages, and I wanted to know what the hell was going on. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer, and she started lying right then and there. Said I was paranoid, that I was imagining things, that her relationship with Mark was strictly professional. She looked me dead in the eyes and told me I was overreacting, that I was crazy for even suspecting her. That moment hit me hard. I felt a mix of rage and sadness. How could she be so cold? How could she lie so effortlessly? I'd always thought we had something real. And now it felt like everything was just a house of cards ready to collapse. I looked at her, this woman I'd loved and trusted, and I saw the bitch she'd become. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what yet. All I knew was that my world was shattering, and I was left standing there, feeling like the biggest fool alive. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I kept replaying everything, her sneering denials, the secret messages, the late nights. I started digging into our finances, partly out of curiosity, partly because I was starting to suspect she'd used our money for something shady. Turns out, she'd hijacked our inheritance, $500,000, from a family trust we'd inherited after my parents died. She used it to buy a house she never intended to live in, claiming it was for investment purposes. But I found out she'd never even signed the papers herself. It was all a lie. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about infidelity. This was about betrayal on a level I'd never imagined. She had schemed, lied, and manipulated her way into our money, into my life. I felt sick to my stomach. I'd always believed in honesty, in loyalty, in doing right by each other. Now I saw that she'd been doing everything behind my back to set herself up for some kind of escape. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time with a plan. I wasn't just going to be the fool who got played. I was going to get to the bottom of her shady dealings, expose her for the liar she was, and figure out how to take back what was ours. I felt anger rising in me, deep, hot, uncontrollable anger. I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything she'd stolen and lied about. There was so much more to come, and I was just getting started. The more I dug into her financials and her side of the story, the clearer it became that Lisa had been planning her escape long before I even suspected. I found bank statements, emails, and receipts that painted a pretty damning picture. She'd secretly been funneling money into a shady marriage settlement, claiming it was for legal reasons. But I knew better. She hijacked our inheritance, $500, and used it to buy a house in her name alone. Not only that, but she'd done it all behind my back, in a way that made me feel like I was just a pawn in her game. One day, I sat her down again, this time with everything laid out on the table. I told her I knew about the inheritance, about the house she bought, and that I had proof. Her face twisted into a sneer as she tried to brush me off, claiming I was paranoid and crazy for thinking she'd do something so shady. She looked at me with this bitchy glare and said, "You're overreacting, John. You always jump to conclusions. Maybe you're the one who's crazy." That's when I realized she was good at lying, good at twisting things around to make herself look like the victim. But I wasn't buying her crap anymore. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her keep thinking she could manipulate her way out of this. I had to come up with a plan to take back control, to make her pay for what she'd done. So I decided to hire a lawyer, someone who specialized in marital law and financial fraud. I wanted to see if I could annul the marriage, recover some of the money, and expose her shady dealings to the authorities if needed. It was a cold, calculated move, but I couldn't afford to be emotional anymore. I'd been blindsided by her lies, her sneering attitude, and her blatant betrayal. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, but I knew I had to stay focused. I also started secretly recording her when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I didn't want to be the fool who believed her lies anymore. I needed evidence, and I was going to get it. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, acting like she was the innocent victim, saying I was crazy for suspecting her. She'd even go as far as to accuse me of controlling her, say I was jealous, or that I was just insecure. That's classic narcissist behavior, right? She'd lie through her teeth, deny everything, and then turn around and accuse me of being the one who was manipulative. It was infuriating, but I kept my cool. I knew that eventually her lies would catch up with her and I'd have the proof I needed. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep her deception went. She'd been planning this for months, maybe even longer. She'd been cozy with Mark, probably sleeping with him in that house she bought, while pretending to be the perfect wife at home. I found texts where she was talking about getting out, about starting fresh, and I knew she was using the house as her escape plan. She'd even started looking at new apartments just in case her divorce went through. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. I was devastated, angry, and utterly betrayed, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew I couldn't let her get away with this, not without a fight. I had to protect what little was left of my dignity and our shared life. The betrayal cut so deep, I wondered how I'd ever trust again. But I also knew that I'd be damned if I let her walk away with everything: our money, our house, my reputation. So I started planning my next moves. I contacted a divorce attorney, and I began gathering every piece of evidence I could find. I wanted her to know I wasn't going down without a fight. I also started thinking about how to expose her to the people around us, especially her boss Mark. If she was that reckless with our money and her marriage, what else was she capable of? My mind was racing with plans, each more ruthless than the last. And through all of this chaos, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of heartbreak and anger. I'd loved Lisa, or at least I thought I did. Now I was starting to see her for what she truly was: someone willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate her way out of a marriage, all for her own gain. The worst part, she still had the nerve to call me crazy, to deny everything, to paint herself as the victim. That's classic narcissist behavior, right? She'd lie through her teeth, deny everything, and then turn around and accuse me of being the manipulative one. It was infuriating, but I kept my cool. I knew that eventually her lies would catch up with her and I'd have the proof I needed. I still remember the day I found out about the house. I was going through some old emails and documents just trying to piece everything together, and I saw the transfer of funds. The amount, the timing, it all matched her story about saving for the future. But the truth was, she'd used my inheritance, our inheritance, to buy a property she had no intention of living in with me. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe longer. That was the moment I realized that this wasn't just infidelity. It was outright theft. It was betrayal on a level I never thought possible. And now, I had to decide what to do next, knowing she was already working on her next move. After I uncovered the extent of her betrayal, I knew I couldn't just sit around and do nothing. Lisa's lies had spun so far out of control that I felt like I was living in some twisted nightmare. I'd gone from being a trusting husband to someone who was constantly on edge, trying to piece together her web of deception. The more I learned, the angrier I got, especially once I realized she'd managed to hijack our inheritance, a quarter of $1 million, and use it to buy that damn house. She always insisted it was for our future, but I knew better. She'd been planning her escape all along, probably even before I started noticing the cracks in her stories. One night I decided enough was enough. I couldn't just confront her with the evidence. I had to do it strategically. I set up a hidden recording device in the living room and waited for her to come home. I wanted her to slip up, to say something incriminating. When she arrived, she immediately became defensive, snapping at me, accusing me of spying, calling me crazy. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was paranoid. But her voice was shaky and her words sounded rehearsed. I caught her lying, twisting the truth, and I had the audio to prove it. That recording became my ace. It was the proof I needed to show her she couldn't keep up her act. I also started compiling everything else: email exchanges, bank statements, receipts. I even hired a private investigator to look into her dealings with Mark, her boss. I needed to know if she'd been sleeping with him, if he played a role in her shady financial moves, and if there was anything else I should know. The pie came back with some shocking info, pictures of her and Mark together in a hotel, confirming what I suspected. They'd been sneaking around and she'd been hiding it from me all along. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act, acting like I was the crazy one, saying I was reading too much into it, or jealous because I was possessive. She told everyone at work I was unstable, that I'd lost my mind. I could see her spinning her web of lies to friends and colleagues, trying to make herself the victim. That was typical narcissist behavior, twisting every situation to make herself look innocent, even as she destroyed everything around her. Her boss Mark was even helping her cover her tracks, telling her to keep her story straight. I started to get a clearer picture of what she'd been doing. The house she bought wasn't just a getaway, it was a backup plan, a way out of our marriage. She'd been planning her divorce, probably with Mark's help, and she'd even begun looking into how to legally shield herself from any repercussions. The worst part, she'd lied so effortlessly that I began questioning how much I could trust anything she said anymore. Her words were like poison, and I was starting to see her true face: cold, manipulative, and completely dishonest. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt like I'd been punched repeatedly, each new discovery knocking me further down. I loved her once, believed in our future, and now I was left with nothing but a pile of lies and broken trust. I'd wake up in the middle of the night wondering how I'd been so blind. How had I missed all the signs? How had she managed to hide this from me for so long? The betrayal cut so deep that I wondered if I'd ever feel normal again. I was mourning the marriage I thought we had, even as I prepared for what was coming next. But amidst the chaos, a part of me grew angrier and more determined. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything: our money, the house, my dignity. I knew I had to take control, to fight for what was rightfully mine. I called a lawyer specializing in marital and financial fraud, and I laid out my case. I told her everything I knew, handed over my evidence, and asked her what my options were. The lawyer was cold and professional. She told me I could pursue legal action to recover the inheritance, challenge the marriage settlement, and possibly even get a divorce on the grounds of betrayal and financial misconduct. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much I'd been manipulated. Lisa had lied, cheated, and stolen from me in ways I never imagined possible. She'd gone from my wife to someone I barely recognized. The betrayal wasn't just about sex, it was about her using me and our marriage for her own gain. That realization was both devastating and liberating. I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to stand up for myself, for what was left of our life together, and make sure she paid for her lies. So I started preparing for the inevitable. I kept gathering evidence, documenting everything, and planning my next moves. I knew she'd try to spin her story to make herself look innocent, but I had the proof to dismantle her lies. I'd fight for what was ours, our inheritance, our marriage, my dignity. It was going to be a long, painful process, but I was done being the fool. I was done being played. Whatever came next, I was determined to see it through, no matter how much it hurt. The day I finally decided to confront Lisa again, I felt like I was walking into a war zone. My nerves were shot, but I knew I couldn't keep hiding behind my evidence forever. I had to face her head on and lay everything out. I scheduled a meeting at her office, told her I needed to talk, and brought along my lawyer's notes and copies of all the proof I'd collected. When she saw the documents spread out on the conference table, her face twisted into that familiar sneer, the one she always used when she thought she was in control. She tried to play innocent, acting like I was overreacting, that I was reading into things, that I was crazy for suspecting her. She even had the nerve to say she was saving us from some imaginary disaster, that I was just jealous of her success and her boss. I looked at her, feeling a mixture of disgust and fury. I told her I knew everything about the affair, the house, the hijacked inheritance, and that I had the proof to back it up. Her eyes widened just a little, but she quickly recovered her composure and started spinning her lies. "I don't know what you're talking about, John," she said, her voice dripping with fake innocence. "You're just paranoid. You always jump to conclusions, and now you're accusing me of things I haven't done. This is all a misunderstanding." She tried to brush it off, but I pressed her harder. I wanted her to see I wasn't backing down. I told her I was done with her lies, that I'd already spoken to a lawyer, and that I was prepared to fight for my rights and our money. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, fake tears streaming down her face, saying she was so hurt, that I was accusing her of things she'd never do, and that I was destroying our marriage. She played the victim, the innocent wife betrayed by her own husband. I could see right through it. I knew she was just trying to manipulate the situation, to make herself look like the wronged party so she could spin her story to everyone else. But I didn't care about her tears or her theatrics anymore. I had what I needed: her lies, her betrayal, the proof of her financial misconduct. I told her I was going to file for divorce, that I wanted full custody of the house and the inheritance, and that I was going to seek legal action to recover the stolen money. I also warned her that if she tried to hide or transfer any more assets, I'd be watching closely. I could see her panic, her bitchy mask slipping just a little, but she quickly masked it with more tears and accusations. That night, I went home feeling exhausted but relieved. I knew the battle was just beginning, but at least I'd taken control of the situation. I had the evidence, the legal backing, and the determination. I had no illusions about how messy this was going to get, especially with her spinning her web of lies, but I was ready. I couldn't let her manipulate her way out of this. She'd already stolen our money, lied to my face, and tried to gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. Now I was going to fight to get back what was ours, and to hold her accountable for everything she'd done. The next few days were chaos. She started playing the victim more aggressively, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I was crazy and possessive. She even told her coworkers I'd lost my mind, trying to turn everyone against me. But I had the evidence, and I made sure my lawyer sent official notices to her and Mark, warning them about the legal actions I was about to take. I wanted her to know I wasn't messing around. Meanwhile, I kept digging into her financial dealings. I discovered she'd been trying to hide some of her assets, transferring money into offshore accounts and buying things under fake names. I wasn't surprised. She'd always been good at covering her tracks. But I had a team of professionals helping me now, and we were closing in. I knew I had to act fast before she managed to cover her tracks even more. Honestly, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. The woman I'd loved, trusted, and married had turned into this manipulative, selfish person who'd lied and cheated her way into her own escape. Every time I thought about everything she'd done, I felt a mix of heartbreak and rage. It was like waking up from a dream only to realize the nightmare was real. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all of this, how I'd been so blind. But I also knew I couldn't dwell on what I'd lost. I had to focus on what I could do now, fighting to protect what was left of my life, my money, and my sanity. I started planning for the divorce, for the recovery of our inheritance, and for exposing her to everyone she'd lied to. I knew she'd try to spin her story, but I had the evidence. I also started thinking about how I'd rebuild after this, how to regain my trust in people, and whether I'd ever be able to look at a marriage the same way again. The betrayal had shattered my world, but I was determined not to let her win, not without a fight. I was tired of being the victim, tired of feeling like I'd lost everything, but I knew I still had some fight left in me, and I was going to use it. The legal process moved quickly once I had all my evidence in place. My lawyer filed the divorce papers, citing infidelity, financial misconduct, and breach of trust. I knew Lisa would try every trick in the book to drag things out, spin her lies, and paint herself as the victim, but I was prepared for that. I had the recordings, the bank statements, the emails, and the Pies reports. I also had her own words, her sneering denial, her fake tears, her manipulative attempts to gaslight me. All of it was going to be used against her in court. She responded by going on the offensive. Lisa hired her own lawyer and started claiming I was unstable, paranoid, and delusional. She said I was trying to control her, that I was jealous of her success, and that I'd been abusive all along. It was classic gaslighting. I could see through her lies, but it didn't stop her from trying to turn everyone against me. She even went as far as to file a restraining order, claiming I was harassing her and that I'd been stalking her at work. That was her way of trying to silence me, to make me look crazy. The court proceedings were exhausting. Every day, Lisa and her lawyer would come up with new tactics, trying to delay the divorce, claiming I was emotionally unstable, or arguing that she deserved the inheritance because she'd contributed to the house. But I had the evidence, and my lawyer was relentless. We presented everything: proof of her affair, the hijacked inheritance, the shady property deal, and slowly the truth began to surface. Meanwhile, I kept feeling the emotional toll. Every hearing, every court appearance brought back memories of the woman I'd loved and trusted, now exposed as a liar and a thief. I'd sit there, listening to her lawyer spin stories, trying to sway the judge, and I'd feel my stomach tighten. I'd never felt so betrayed in my life. The heartbreak was compounded by the anger at her betrayal, anger that I'd been played for a fool, and anger at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. As the weeks went on, I started seeing some progress. The judge ruled in my favor on several issues, awarding me full custody of the house, halting her attempt to transfer assets offshore, and ordering her to produce financial records. It was a small victory, but it felt huge at the time. I also learned that the court was investigating her for financial fraud, which could result in criminal charges. That was a bitter pill for her to swallow, seeing her plans unravel, her lies exposed, and her reputation on the line. Throughout all of this, I experienced a roller coaster of emotions. I felt relief, anger, sadness, and even moments of hope. I was devastated by the betrayal, but also relieved that I was finally taking control of the situation. I realized that I'd been living in a fog, trusting blindly, ignoring the warning signs, and now I was waking up to the harsh reality. I'd lost my wife, yes, but I was gaining clarity. I was learning to stand up for myself and reclaim what was rightfully mine. One of the hardest parts was seeing her try to spin her story to mutual friends and colleagues. She told everyone I'd gone crazy, that I was possessive, and that I'd been abusive, trying to paint herself as the victim. But I had the evidence, and I shared it with a few close friends, people who knew us well. They saw through her lies and supported me. That was a small comfort in the chaos, but it helped me realize I wasn't alone in this. Ultimately, I learned a lot from this nightmare. I learned to trust my instincts, to pay attention to the red flags, and to never ignore my gut feelings again. I also learned that some people are just selfish and manipulative, capable of doing anything to get what they want. And most importantly, I learned that I had to fight for myself, even when everything seemed lost. You can't let someone steal your life and get away with it, no matter how convincing their lies are. Now, as I look ahead, I know there's a long road of healing ahead. I'm still picking up the pieces, still trying to rebuild my trust in people, but I'm also stronger for having gone through it. The betrayal was brutal, but it taught me to value honesty and integrity more than ever. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know I'm done being naive. I'll never trust blindly again, and I'll never let someone use me like that again. If there's one thing I want anyone reading this to understand, it's this: be vigilant. Trust your instincts. And if someone shows you their true colors early on, don't ignore the signs. Because once the betrayal happens, it's almost impossible to go back to the way things were. But you can choose to move forward stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever comes next. Looking back now, I realize how much I underestimated the depth of her deception. Lisa was manipulative from the start, masterful at hiding her true intentions behind a veneer of success and charm. She always knew how to twist the narrative, how to make herself look innocent even when she was at her worst. Her bitchy attitude, the way she dismissed my concerns, the constant lying, it all added up to a person who was willing to do anything to get what she wanted, even if it meant destroying everything I believed in. Getting through the legal battles and the aftermath has been one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I can honestly say I've come out of it with a clearer sense of who I am and what I deserve. I learned that trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. That betrayal leaves scars, and sometimes you have to cut your losses and walk away. I've also learned that revenge isn't just about getting even. It's about reclaiming your dignity and standing up for yourself when everything else seems to be falling apart. One of the biggest lessons I take from this is that people's true colors tend to show in moments of crisis. Lisa's true nature was revealed in her lies, her greed, and her willingness to manipulate her way out of a marriage she clearly saw as a stepping stone. I was naive enough to believe her words at face value, but now I see how dangerous that kind of blind trust can be. Now I focus on rebuilding my life. I'm working on healing, on trusting again, but more carefully this time. The betrayal has made me more cautious, more aware of the warning signs. I don't want to be blindsided again. I've also started to reconnect with friends and family, people who saw through her lies and stood by me. Their support has been invaluable, reminding me that I'm not alone in this mess. As for Lisa, I have no doubt she'll try to move on to rebuild her image or perhaps to find someone new to manipulate. That's her pattern: use, lie, discard, repeat. But I refuse to let her define me or my future. I've learned that some people are just broken inside, and no matter how much they pretend to be something else, their true selves eventually come out. I've seen her true colors, and I won't ignore them anymore. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone reading this, it's this: trust your gut. Pay attention to the red flags early on, because once the damage is done, it's difficult to undo. Don't ignore the small signs, those little gut feelings that tell you something isn't right. Because when betrayal hits, it hits hard, and it can change everything in an instant. Finally, I want to say that while this experience has been devastating, it's also been a catalyst for growth. I'm stronger now because I've faced the worst and survived. I've learned to value honesty, integrity, and loyalty far more than I ever did before, and I'll never let anyone manipulate me again. I hope my story serves as a warning, but also as a reminder: no matter how dark things seem, you can come out the other side, wiser, tougher, and ready to rebuild your life from the ground up.